or in Tanakh, or in general knowledge, and this other person might add to what you know in a certain way that you synthesize. The other advantage is that you can pick and choose what you want to learn. Now, I have one of my chavrusas that I learned with many years here in the room, Aaron. We started with the Kuzari, and we learned a lot of stuff together, and then he moved on. But Baruch Hashem, we're continuing that tradition every morning. Now, in positive psychology, which is getting popular now, there is a concept of engagement. How does it work? If you have the choice, well, what is it that makes a person happy? Is it pleasure and things and money? That's one category. It's not. It's shown over and over again that that doesn't work. What works is two main things: giving and engagement. Engagement is something that's very easy to reach when you're in a chavruta, because you have to be putting yourself into it. You're not just listening to somebody do it. And another thing about chavruta is it's milchemta shel Torah. It's working things out in a dispute kind of a way. Now, the dispute is something that's the basis of practically everything we learn. I mean, from the time of Chazal on, whenever we pick up a Gemara, we're talking about Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, and they had different opinions, and Shammai and Hillel, and Abaye and Rava, and so forth. Now, both sides gain much from the association with the other one. Now, just this morning, we've been learning Derech Chaim, which is the Maral's Perush on Pirkei Avot. And we're in the 5th parak, and we're up to the very interesting Mishnah that says, Kol malacha shehu l'shem shamayim sofo lehitkayim, Kol machloket. Kol machloket shehu l'shem shamayim sofo lehitkayim, Kol machloket she'eino l'shem shamayim ein sofo lehitkayim. Now, what's the one example? Shammai and Hillel. What's the other example? Korach v'adato. Okay. Maharal has two questions. And this is an example of the way he thinks these things out. There's two questions here. The first question is, the Reisha conflicts with the Seifa. First statement conflicts with the second statement. Why? Because you have two extreme opposites. Korach has 0 l'shem shamayim. Hillel and Shammai are 100% l'shem shamayim. So if you take those as examples, everything short of Korach has some measure of lo l'shem shamayim. And all of those things are excluded by taking Korach as your paradigm for eino l'shem shamayim. And the same thing on the other end with Hillel and Shammai. What about others? If they're the extreme 100% l'shem shamayim, what about if you have someone that might not be 100% l'shem shamayim? Maybe there's an element of arrogance. Maybe there's an element of financial gain. Maybe there's some other thing that is not l'shem shamayim. And if you're saying that that extreme excludes everything in between, then you have the conflict of the Reisha to the Seifa. And he has a very simple answer for that. And that is that you have to deal with it in a relative way. In other words, you take the two extremes, but there's a continuum between the two extremes. And the degree to which it's l'shem shamayim, it's mitkayim. And the degree to which it's not l'shem shamayim, it's not Mikayim. So that now all of a sudden, instead of having one conflict with the other, it includes the whole spectrum, and he answered that question. Now, he brings a very interesting idea about machloket. And remember, machloket, l'shem shamayim, is the thing that generates the good stuff. It's mikayim. It continues on. He brings a medrash from Breshit Rabbah that Gehenim umachloket nivra'u b'yom sheni. That means Monday is the day that Gehenim and dispute were created. Mizeh teda ki inyan shneim davar echad. You know, those two things are really the same thing. Ki kasher davar echad nechlak l'shnei chalakim. If you take a thing that's unified, that's complete, take a kli, and you break it, it's no longer a kli. It no longer has any use. So that's something called a lack of kiyum. It doesn't have any ongoing existence. Tomorrow, it's going to be in a waste can. You're not going to ever put those two pieces together. Humpty Dumpty, you can't put back together again. So what's happening there is something goes from being to non-being, and that's another medieval philosophy terminology. He talks about hedar, the lack of existence, and kiyum is existence. So you kind of get the picture here that machloket l'shem shamayim, that's what happens when you have chavruta. That is mitkayim. That's how the Jewish people survived all these years. They didn't survive in big study halls. They didn't survive only in books. They survived by chavruta, fathers with their children, rebbeim with their talmidim. This has been going on for 3,300 years since Matan Torah. And where do we learn it from? We learn it from Ito. Hashem actually had this interactive fellowship with Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, I want to include one little piece of the Maharal from this week's Parsha that's coming up this Shabbat, which is Parshat Bamidbar. And the very first pasuk in Bamidbar says, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe, B'midbar Sinai b'oel moed be'echad lachodesh hasheni b'shana hashenit. And then in the 9th chapter in Bahalotcha, it says a very similar pasuk. Now the first one relates to the Degalim and the census. The second one relates to the Pesach that Hashem asked Moshe Rabbeinu to conduct in the second year, Pesach of the second year. And it's very similar terminology. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe, b'midbar Sinai, b'shana hashenit, b'tzeitam me'eretz Mitzrayim, b'chodesh harishon. Now there's, Rashi jumps on this right away, and all of us could understand that we started the book in the second month, and then 9 chapters later, we're doing something in the first month of the same year. What's going on? And Rashi explains that there's a matter of gnut, there's a matter of disgrace, that Hashem wanted to cover up something about Bnei Yisrael. And therefore, he didn't want to start a sefer with something that had an element of gnut. Now we have to figure out what is the gnut. So the first Rashi says, Parsha Shabarosh HaSefer Lo Nemra Al Iyar Okay. What does it come to tell you, he says? Ein mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah. This is the example that's given in the Gemara of it's obvious that what happened in the second month came before what happened in the first month. And if that happens, there's what is the disgrace? So Rashi goes on to say a second thing, that there was some sort of a disgrace. Okay. He doesn't say what the disgrace is. Tosfos contributes in Kedushin that there was an element of disgrace because of the Chet HaMeraglim. The Chet HaMeraglim generated 38 extra years in the desert, and that because of the lack of the north wind, which was held back because of the Ananei Kavod, therefore there was a health risk and they couldn't do Milah. And if you don't do Milah and you have people with Milah in your midst, you don't do Korban Pesach. That's Tosfos. And Ramban goes further, and he says first an answer a little bit like Tosfos, that it was ultimately a sin, and that's what the disgrace was. And then he gives another one that actually they didn't have to, they could have got a Korban Pesach anyway, but they didn't do it, and that was even a bigger disgrace. Says the Maharal that we don't need that explanation because Onas Rachmana Patre, there is no sin involved in this whole thing, but there is a disgrace in what? In the lack of fulfillment of the positive commandment. In other words, if Hashem tells us to do something, we have a good excuse we don't do it, we're putter. But that's not good enough because we still haven't fulfilled the mitzvah, and there is left a disgrace in not fulfilling the mitzvah. Take an example of a chiger, a lame person, on Yontif. He goes up he can't go up to the Har HaBayit for Re'iyah because there's a requirement that he be able to walk up there. But he still is faulted for not doing the mitzvah. He's not faulted. It's a little bit disgraceful. And that little bit of disgrace was enough for Hashem to change the order of the Torah so that the second month came first and the first month came later. I want to finish with one other idea. We are all basking in the glow of Yom Yerushalayim that we had yesterday. Not only that, but from that day in 1967, we have been basking in the glow of that day ever since. Hashem did an amazing thing for us. He gave us back Yerushalayim after all these years, almost 2,000 years. He did something to fulfill the wishes, the dreams of the people that were davening for the same kinds of things, Binyan Yerushalayim and so forth. Now it's true that we can't get to the ultimate, and the Gula isn't here yet. But there is this wonderful feeling that we have the zechut of living in a time where we're able to live here. Now, let's go back to Rabbi Yitzchak's answer. When he says there should have been the first mitzvah, but we already explained that there's a difference between mitzvah and Torah, but they're really the same thing, but Torah is the way Hashem wants us to do it. Now, in the answer that he gives, he talks about Eretz Yisrael. He quotes a pasuk, Koach Maasecha Higid La'amo Latet Lahem Nachlat Goyim. There is a point to learning Torah from Bereshit, and that is that we have the lesson, and he doesn't say, tell it to the Ummot. He says, tell it to ourselves. That Hashem created the world, and because Hashem created the world, he can give it to whomever he wants. This is an argument. This is a claim that we have. And that claim came back, I don't know about Herzl, but Weizmann, Ben Gurion, Netanyahu, they all refer to the biblical claim that Hashem gave it to us. And that's the point, that's the very first point that Rashi wants to tell us. Now there's an interesting thing about Rashi. He doesn't tell you all of the different medrashim. He doesn't give you a whole scope of different ideas. Sometimes he says davar acher, and he gives a second medrash. But if you look at something like Tikkunei Zohar of Reb Chaim Vital, that is 99 perushim on the same pasuk that we're talking about. Breshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. Now that's an amazing thing. That of all the things that Rashi could have said, he brought us this Rabbi Yitzchak that tells us about Koach Maaseh Higid La'amo, that we have a reason to live here, that we have an excuse. He wasn't talking to the Ummot, he was talking to us. Now, tell me that Rashi was not a religious Zionist. The Gur Aryeh goes on, and he quotes the Ramban that we know very well, that all of the Torah depends on Eretz Yisrael. And that means that both the Maharal and the Ramban were religious Zionists too. And of course, Yehuda Halevi. Now, maybe I'm going beyond what I'm allowed to say, but I think that there's a really amazing thing going on here. That Eretz Yisrael is basic to Torah. We say in our davening every day, twice on weekdays and 3 times on Shabbos and Yantiv. Tesok liyotenu lechatzrot kodshecha, lishmor chukecha v'la'asot ritzonecha, u'la'ovdecha b'leivav shalem. Seems like all of those things that Hashem is asking of us, tefillah and ahava, are totally on living in Eretz Yisrael. It's an amazing statement. And I'm going to end with this because it's not just the glow of yesterday when we celebrated Yom Yerushalayim, but it's the glow of all of our lives that we have this, and I'm talking to an audience that appreciates it and understands how Eretz Yisrael is woven into what Hashem expects us in our day-to-day life. I want to thank you all, each and every one. Now, I didn't say yet. When we're done shortly, we're going to have questions and answers, but there's dessert for you here. I want to give thanks to my manager and publicity public relations person, and she serves